I'm very pleased today to be talking with you about a project I've been involved with for the last year or so, which goes under the title, Can Systems Thinking Be an Antidote to Extensive Evil? Let me tell you what this presentation will involve. The first part is a systems thinker's view of the structures underlying the spread of what others call extensive evil. That will involve unfolding maps and telling stories and hunting for leverage points. The second part is a systems modeler's justification for approaching the problem the way I did. Why did I think it was the right way to do this? And what are the potential implications for other work? But first, we have to know what is extensive evil. Here are five rather awful examples in the 20th century, each of which resulted in the murders of millions of people and distorted marvelous traditional cultures. What led to this project? Well, the remote origin is Hannah Arendt's report of the trial of Eichmann in Jerusalem, which she subtitled A Report on the Banality of Evil. Banal, you might not have that right on the tip of your tongue. Banal means trite or obvious or predictable. So Arendt subtitled her report The Obviousness of Evil. Elisabeth Minnich was a student of Hannah Arendt many years ago and thought about this for most of her professional life, eventually starting out with the notion that the banality of evil, the triteness of evil, was exactly the opposite of what people thought in 1963. Evil was unpredictable, awful, far from trite. So she thought about it for a long time and eventually wrote a book of her own called The Evil of Banality, where she had switched it around with the meaning of the evil of the trite, obvious, and predictable. She and a co-author decided to invite a number of us to contribute chapters related to her book, The Evil of Banality. I was invited to contribute a chapter from the point of view of a systems thinker and modeler. How would one of us approach the problem of the emergence of extensive evil? So we begin. About a third of the way through her book, Minnich gives a summary of the gradual emergence of extensive evil, which I'll give partly here. In a time in which things are harder than usual for many of us, when we're off balance, anxious, angry, and a new group appears, seeking power. Those who speak of and for it are vivid, forceful, emotional, and they promise to better our lot in life. This new order, if we go with it, will open doors for us to money, power, status. We listen. Our minds begin to change. Regulations, manners and mores, styles, some laws also change. This is real. Something is happening. Soon the new order convinces us that it is a done deal. Even when we have qualms as we see signs of danger, we decide to go along. After all, we're not risk takers, and we have careers to forward, lives to live, people to take care of, significance to be achieved. So starting from that capsule description of the first third of an entire book, I began to think how a systems thinker modeler ought to approach this problem. I began with stocks. 5 stocks that really make up the core of the model. People committed to the old order, a more or less neutral group moving along the way, and people committed to the new order. and regulations, manners, and mores that fit the old order and gradually change to fitting the new order. I then began to add structure. In this case, the bold loops are reinforcing loops that are gradually creating the circumstances where people in the old order begin to consider the new, and the neutral people become willing to commit to the new order. All of these loopy structures going around like this are reinforcing loops. Incidentally, these figures, there are 5 of them, are the figures that appear in the book, but without the book and the article that came from it, but without the bold arrows. Here, we've added those norms at the bottom, the regulations, manners, and mores, and we've added the structure that starts to implement change from the old order to the new order. And once again, there's a lot of reinforcing things here that lead to the perceived acceptance of the new order and the growth of the new group's power to implement change. The 4th figure is fascinating. We may have to come back to this, but the notion here is that there are 2 evolutions of language going on. When it starts out, and I'll go back a step, when it starts out there are 2 kinds of goals professed. But as we go along, as the new group begins to perceive that they're really being accepted, they start to get more explicit about their underlying goals. When they started, their professed goals were pretty much the same as the goals of the old order group. So gradually, this professed goals switches from that to that. And as that happens, the old order begins to unconsciously adapt their goals, and their goals begin to look more like these professed goals. The net effect is that the perceived match here between promises of the new order and goals of the order starts out a lot like the goals of the old order, and over time it stays a lot like that, even though both of these goal structures are moving over time toward the underlying goals of the new group. Finally, we have almost total acceptance. The new group has power to coerce people against their wills, and that allows them to drag people into being committed or apparently committed to the new group. It allows them to implement change even if others don't like it. It shows some signs of the new order, but some people are willing to downplay or ignore them. And we end up with the full map, that's as extensive as it gets in the article. You may be interested to know that in this it looks ugly, but it's pretty simple map. There are 151 loops that go through that central circle. Incidentally, I told in the article, I said the circles don't mean anything. They're just pointing you, capturing your attention. And the article goes into some detail about what those orange boxes are, and we know those to be stocks. So, the new order wants to exploit leverage points in this structure. And what are those? Well, the society is open. Their openness to the way people speak, and they tend to accept the goals and traditions that are around, including those of the new order. Behavior is malleable. People show acceptance of new goals, customs, and habits of speech, new regulations, manners, and mores, saluting, singing new songs. Inevitability, gradually there comes a realization that The new order is inevitable and people don't want to be left behind. Eventually, force comes into play. Some are willing to downplay or ignore the signs of danger, which makes it easier for that force to take hold, and it forces some people to succumb to coercion. It turns out that those leverage points for the evil regime are the same leverage points for resistance. This is where the resistance would push back. Now, what does resistance look like? Refusal to be open to the rhetoric of the new order. Refusal to accept the goals and traditions of the new order. Refusal to accept the new customs and habits of speech. Refusal to accept new regulations, manners, and mores. Refusal to accept the belief that the new order is inevitable. Willingness, even headstrong choice to be left behind. I don't care, they can go their own way. Unwillingness to downplay or ignore signs of danger. Refusal to succumb to coercion. If you think about it, these aspects of resistance require remarkable capabilities, a remarkably far-sighted awareness of the true evil nature of the new order, an obstinacy, a bone-headed stubbornness to maintain civility and commitment to the common good in the face of extensive evil and power, a level of astonishing heroism that we hope is not all too rare, an unfailing, all-consuming sense of the deep values of civil society. An interviewer was speaking with a 93-year-old Polish fellow who'd been part of the resistance many years ago when he was young and then became part of the government as he became old. She asked him what was he thinking about all the while in those various different roles, and he said, "I was just trying to be decent." I urge you all, if you ever can, to get to the Norwegian Resistance Museum in Oslo. It's a remarkable statement of the wonderful things that Norwegians did to resist the Nazi occupation in World War II. You'll read about paper clips. Students started putting paper clips in their lapels to signify that they were part of the resistance and they were clipped together. Shunning. It became common for Norwegians never to speak to the Germans in German, pretending they didn't know any. Teachers. It's a remarkable story which you can best find out about in the Resistance Museum, but the occupying Nazi folks wanted to change the curriculum in the schools, and the teachers refused. 8,000 to 10,000 teachers refused. They took a bunch off to concentration camps in the north of Norway. The teachers still refused, and finally the Norwegians gave up. I took my son there, and when we were leaving, I asked what he got out of that wonderful museum, and he said, I learned there should not be another Hitler. And I also learned if there is, we should resist. That's what the Norwegians taught my son. Now, I have two kinds of substantive conclusions. From the outside, an analytic perspective, I think it's possible to derive principles for preventing the spread of extensive evil and the maintenance of extensive good. It might tell us how to avoid extensive evil in the first place. But from the inside, from the perspective of actors within the system, I think systems thinking is much less promising. It may suggest what I ought to do, but not what I have the courage to do, unless I'm one of those rare and remarkable heroes that awful times somehow seem to produce. At the end of the paper, I thought some about values, which I won't talk about here, but I was addressing the question, does systems thinking push in the direction of the common good and civil society? You may have your own thoughts here. Now, I'd like to change the topic and switch to talking about why I wrote this article the way I did. Why did I approach the problem with diagrams? Why not a formal model? Why these diagrams encumbered with stocks and flows? Why not just causal loop diagrams? As you may guess, the answers are important to me, and I think they're crucial to our field. Why not a formal model? Well, that had to do with the other authors in the book. Everything they wrote was verbal, qualitative, thoughtful. In fact, one of the co-authors is a folk singer that I have known about for most of my 50 years of singing folk music. That's Cy Khan. His piece was an extended poem with quotes from a bunch of his songs. I also felt that the audience for the book was largely non-quantitative. I don't know why I thought that, but that's what I thought. And my worries were that justifying equations and showing simulations wouldn't help to communicate the emotion-laden stories, might actually interfere with communication of the ideas that would be important to the audience, would actually diminish what reaches my literate audience. Rightly or wrongly, those are my worries. In more detail, why stocks and flows? Well, let's look at our history. Forrester said all his entire life in our field never used causal loop diagrams for conceptualization. I say, what part of never don't you understand? Randers, early on, using causal loop diagrams in my dissertation almost cost me my PhD. Actually, Forrester was its chair, but that wasn't the reason. You should talk with Jorgen. In fact, I may have his claim incorrect. Richardson and Pugh wrote, stocks are the sources of dynamics. We can actually prove that. Barry Richmond, one of our greatest teachers, said begin with stocks. That's how he wrote Stella and I Think. And David Anderson said participatory model building should always start with stocks, assuming the goal is to understand structure as the source of dynamics. But we don't have to just listen to the wise words. We can just think about what's going on here. Stocks are essential to the story. These tubs of people and customs are crucial characterizations. And the pipes show how people change over time. People committed to the old order open up to new possibilities and become more or less neutral, and eventually can become committed to the new order. This tells the story how people move over time. Now look, if you did it in causal loop diagrams, this diagram is this diagram. Each pipe is 2 or maybe even 4 arrows. People committed to the old order. They're flowing through this and flowing into that. So these 2 arrows are the pipe going to the right, and these 2 arrows are subtracting from the stock on the left. Each pipe adds to here and subtracts from there. It's a nightmare of arrows. This communicates, this befuddles. Those are the real methodological reasons, but here's the elephant in the room. There it is. That's what the diagram, it's exactly the diagram I have shown you, but written as a causal loop diagram. And here it is the way I developed it in the book chapter and the article. Which would you rather look at? Which would your students rather look at? Which can they see what's going on, and which can't they see what's going on? Face it, if we want understanding, we can't present pictures that look like that. People can't understand it. If it looks like they're understanding, they're just taking your word for it. Instead, we have to build up to this, showing stocks when they're crucial. Where's all of this heading? Well, in this work, I tried my best to create a very high quality representation of the emergence of extensive evil. But it was just based on my own principles for good work without simulation. My own work, my own principles are not good enough. In fact, for some of you, my results may not have met your standards for excellence in our field. I know I left out some things. The field, this is important, the field desperately needs explicit, widely known principles for excellent qualitative work. Here's how we do it with formal models. We think about structure, we draw pictures, those pictures help us formulate a model. We look at time series and we simulate our model and compare the model behavior with the time series and go round and round in systems conceptualization, model formulation, new diagrams, new simulations. And of course, there's empirical evidence here, data, literature, lots of alternative models, experience. This diagram comes from years of working with my friend Khalid Saeed, who drew the first version of this long ago. Then he added, most recently, a piece on it, asking for model analysis and understanding and tools for model analysis, because we're getting more and more of that for formal models. So where do we need better qualitative tools? I've overwritten the word model with map, so we'd emphasize that what we're doing is drawing pictures here. We are formulating a map and deducing map behavior and drawing map structure and so on. And we don't have simulation, so thinking aids are what we'd substitute. So where do we need better tools? Obviously, right there. We try to infer from our complicated maps how the map would actually behave. We know this is extraordinarily difficult for humans and trivial for computing. We need thinking aids. That suggests, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had tools for map analysis and understanding that are still qualitative, but would help us? In this work, I used two tools extensively. I used system structure to tell system stories. That's one tool. I tried to see if I could use the map by itself, without assuming anything else, to tell known system stories. Then I went the other way. I took system stories to see if the map I had, without anything else, could reflect those system stories. Or can those system stories show that I've left things out or captured things incorrectly? These are mental simulations. I felt if I could mentally simulate both ways, it might help. What else would have helped? Well, empirical and inferred time series. There's no reason why we can't use real data in our qualitative studies. What's qualitative is the map that we've produced, not the fact that we've just completely ignored data. Yes, I left out empirical and inferred time series. I felt bad about that. I left them out because I didn't think I had room for them in the article. But it's an omission. They should be there. We would put them together with whatever we can say about the map behavior, and we'd compare as best we could. We'd love to have tools for helping us do this sort of thing. Uh, wouldn't it be great if we had tools that we have never thought about for helping the way we draw diagrams? Well, of course, I put in stocks and pipes, but are there other things that might help us represent model structure in a qualitative way? What are the biggies in this? I think they're the ones with the stars. Uh, Always include empirical time series. If we have to work really hard on being able to deduce map behavior better and evolve tools for map analysis. And is there anything about our diagrams which could possibly help? Our task as a field is to discover strategies and tools that can help us create the very highest quality qualitative system dynamics work possible. We don't have anything like that now. We would teach these strategies and tools, make them universally known in our field, and we'd insist upon their use. We would, I'm going to say it again, our task is to discover strategies and tools that can help us create the very highest quality qualitative system dynamics work possible, teach the strategies and tools, make them known, insist upon their use. I don't want to do this alone. Send me your thoughts with others. I'll compile, edit, and share them. And I hope you can send them to me by email. I'll send them back, I promise. I'd like to end with something dramatic. So, several weeks ago, I stumbled over the following words from Isaiah. Isaiah has God saying this, but in this case, it's just me. I want to say, so shall my word be that goes out from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose and succeed in the thing for which I sent it. Send me your thoughts. Thanks very much.